right, training camp is underway, which means you're about to see a whole bunch of slow-mo passes by Aaron Rodgers and touchdowns and all this good stuff while they're in gym shorts, and we're going to overanalyze everything to the nth degree. But that's all right. But I got some notes from today's practice. We're going to talk a little bit about the standout players, how the offense looked, how the defense looked, and I'll give you guys my general thoughts. But if you haven't done so already, get over to talkinjets.com. Get your tickets to our Week 4 Group Buy Jets Broncos. We only got a few tickets left, so make sure you hop on that quickly. All right, let's go into the analysis and the breakdown. We're going to start with some general notes. So if you guys don't know, I'm a big member over on the Jet Nation forums, and our buddy KRL goes to some of these practices, and he does awesome write-ups on everything. So I'm going to go through his notes because I feel like they are the most concise that I've come across on the interweb. So KRL, thank you so much for this insight. General notes, he says practice consisted of players in shirts and shorts. So if you watch any of the videos coming out, that's obviously what you saw. The first practice of camp was short, lasting an hour and 45 minutes. I feel like that's generally how long the training camp practices last. It's usually like right around that 2-hour mark. Anyway, change in the warm-up routine. Last year, all players went through the same exercises together. This year, the warm-up period was tailored to the position you play. So if you're a speed player, running back, wide receiver, cornerback, you would work on vertical speed over longer distances. If you were a power player, defensive line or offensive line, you work on short area speed and horizontal movements. We'll see if it prevents injuries. I'll be honest, this is kind of a mind-boggling one for me. Like, I wouldn't expect to see my offensive linemen and defensive linemen running with the wide receivers and cornerbacks and like the speed guys. So I guess from purely like a change of philosophy, this makes a lot of sense. And hopefully this does cut back on injuries. This is how I would have hoped they would have done it in the past, but positive change there. Lots of new drills incorporated by the offensive line coach, Keith Carter, using more live bodies when going over technique hand placement instead of only pads. Having players work on their upper body posture by balancing wooden sticks on their shoulders. Interesting. Guess keep your shoulders level. I want to see some clips of that, see what that actually sort of means. Having players strengthen their hand punch by working with sandbags. So I guess offensive line-wise, it is nice to see that we're changing up the philosophy to some degree. And I don't know, maybe they went a little too soft in practice last year, trying to prevent injury, and it ultimately bit us in the butt. That's sort of how I'm reading this right here. Keith Carter did not get a lot of praise, especially from Mekhi Becton. We heard some comments made about Keith Carter in regards to Taylor Lewan, his former tackle in Tennessee. Didn't really like him, so he was kind of under fire over the course of the offseason. A lot of Jet fans didn't think that he would be coming back, or maybe didn't necessarily want him back after how the offensive line performed last year. So it is nice to see that this was kind of going in the right direction. We'll get a little bit more onto the running backs here in a little bit. Morgan Moses was working on the side with the trainers. Morgan Moses is coming back from an injury, which is escaping me right now. I want to say it was like a pec or something like that is what he wound up tearing. So he's working his way back. I expect him to be back for the beginning part of the season. The initial players auditioning for the return job are Xavier Gipson, Malachi Corley, Tariq Cohen, and Brandon Codrington. I would expect Gibson and Corley, obviously, to have the inside track here. I think with the new kickoff rules, Tariq Cohen is kind of your dark horse as possibly getting in there. And I'll be honest, I haven't watched a whole lot. I haven't watched anything of Codrington. So we'll keep an eye on him as we go throughout training camp and practice. Maybe he's, makes a name for himself. And then a fairly even practice as the offense started out hot early during 11-on-11 and 7-on-7 drills. The defense stiffened later during the red zone period. So I did see a few comments about Rodgers not punching it into the end zone initially on the red zone opportunities. I think he had one catch or one completion to Garrett Wilson, and then there was like a tipped ball, a ball thrown behind. I think it was Xavier Gipson or something along those lines. So we'll kind of go through that as we go. Defense comes in. Jamion Sherwood diagnosing and blowing up a screen pass to Xavier Valade as he got reps with the starters. Jamion Sherwood is one of those players that I'm keeping an eye on this year because his contract is up at the end of the year, and we are going to have to start to transition CJ Mosley kind of out of this defense. Now, obviously, we've got CJ under contract for the next 2 years, but longer in the tooth, you would like to be able to see maybe a young tandem of a Quincy Williams and a Jamion Sherwood. So something to keep an eye on as we go throughout camp. I have been pretty impressed with Sherwood, and I think Green Bean brought it up the other day that like his missed tackles was like either nothing or like very, very low last year. So very excited to see what Sugarwood's got the rest of this training camp and throughout the season. The new defensive tackle, Leki Fotu, had a couple of flashy plays as he blew up Tarik Cohen for no gain, and he knocked down a Tyrod Taylor pass at the line of scrimmage. So new defensive tackle in here. I believe he was from Arizona, kind of replacing our Al Woods / Jefferson, I guess between him and Kinlaw, making those types of adjustments in there. So it's nice to see the defensive line still, I don't know, causing havoc. A couple of young cornerbacks stood out during reps. JBC, our cornerback we drafted out of LSU last year, had a nice read and pass breakup on Tyrod Taylor. Rookie Quantez Stiggers had a pick 6 off Andrew Peasley. Stiggers read where the quarterback was going with the ball, fell off his man, and picked off the pass. Stiggers is going to be one of those fan favorites, I think, throughout training camp. And I almost wish we had Hard Knocks this year because I want to see a little bit more into his backstory with the Canadian Football League and how he's kind of worked his way into the NFL. And then how he's going to perform. We saw a bunch of highlights from him throughout minicamp earlier this offseason. So I'm very excited to see the young group of DBs we have. A couple of nice plays by Sauce Gardner during red zone period. He almost had an interception on a pass to Gibson that was batted up in the air. He showed excellent technique on Garrett Wilson as he forced him to widen his route on an attempted fade from Aaron Rodgers, which fell incomplete. It's one of those iron sharpens iron situations here with Sauce going up against Garrett Wilson, and that was probably my favorite battle to watch all of last offseason throughout training camp. And just like seeing how these guys got the best of one another, one in and one out. Because it wasn't always like Garrett always beating Sauce or Sauce always beating Garrett. It was kind of like a jockeying of position and how, like that little chess match of like, okay, he did this time. How's he going to do it differently next time? Seems like Sauce got the better of Garrett in today's practice. Offensive notes. Nice chunk runs by the running backs, Breece Hall, Braylon Allen, and Isaiah Davis during 11-on-11, each going for 15-plus yards. Again, there's no pads on, so you got to kind of take this with a grain of salt. I don't think it's maybe the best time to be grading running backs, but I guess it's good to see them running wild. Noticeable lack of reps for Izzy Abanikanda out of the backfield, and the one rep he did stand out was a dropped screen from Peasley. So based on everything we've seen and just the bringing in of additional running backs this offseason through the draft and Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis, really makes you think Izzy is not on great footing here going throughout camp. We'll obviously keep an eye on it, but not a lot to see from him from last year. And then obviously, maybe less expectations with the bringing in of other running backs. With Rodgers back at quarterback, there was an Allen Lazard sighting as he caught the first pass of practice for 20-plus yards. He also caught a touchdown from Rodgers during red zone, which led to the defense having to do push-ups. I would love to get anything out of Allen Lazard. I've basically gone into this season assuming Lazard is like a washed player. Like I'm not expecting a lot out of him. I'm thinking he's wide receiver 4 at best, and then maybe we trade for a Devontae Adams and he's like wide receiver 5, which in essentially still have Breece Hall and Conklin and other guys that are going to be competing for reps anyway. But if Rodgers has some connection with Lazard and Lazard actually starts playing better than we saw from last year or playing like at all, it can only help us. He's going to be on this team. I know there were some rumors of like, oh, could he be a camp cut casualty? But the contract is ironclad. He's going to be here throughout the year. So hopefully he does continue to impress in training camp here. Quarterback notes. Rodgers picked apart the defense in early part of practice with the ball rarely touching the ground. Particularly interesting was watching him use his cadence to force the defense to show what they were going to do on one play, then exploiting a void in the defense with a wide open screen to validate for 15-plus yards. Watching Aaron Rodgers operate behind the line of scrimmage before the snap even happens and how he's trying to diagnose and move little pieces around the offense is just so fascinating to watch, and it's something that I'm very much looking forward to because even if Hackett calls a play that we don't particularly like, I mean, how many times do we see Aaron Rodgers shake his head or say like, oh, you should be running this play or whatever throughout Hard Knocks and training camp and then also like on the sideline throughout the course of the season? This is what we were missing all of last year. Tyrod Taylor had a noticeable play during red zone when he hit Irv Charles on a post route for a touchdown. He also showed some of his Buffalo tendencies when his first read isn't there. He looks to get out of the pocket immediately. You know what? For a backup quarterback, I think that's kind of all right. I guess I'm not really like grading Tyrod Taylor on too crazy hard of a curve, but compared to what we got out of Zach Wilson last year, being able to at least be aware that you need to move off your first read and continue to go. I guess that's all right. Nothing too shocking there from the offense. Everything I kind of want to see. As far as standout players, he says Aaron Rodgers, Allen Lazard. Based on those notes, that's definitely what I've seen. Sauce Gardner having the nice jockeying for position with Garrett Wilson throughout today. And then Keith Carter. This is nice. I like that he mentions Keith Carter here. Obviously, the notes about the running backs and them ripping off 15-yard plus runs and having the offensive line do different types of drills, something that we're going to keep an eye on throughout the course of training camp. So I very much am optimistic for what we've gotten out of day one. Again, it's just day one, and we're not really in pads yet, so grain of salt here. But guys, let me know what you thought of day one of training camp. What was your favorite aspect that we were able to kind of key in on? Leave a green heart down below if you made it this far in the video. Boys and girls, thank you so much for watching the show.